Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything, and I'm coming at you with another Wargaming in Miniature terrain tutorial, how to make fuel dumps. I'm going to make cheap and easy 55-gallon fuel drums out of drinking straws. Okay, we're going to base it on MDF board because that's what I base it on. I base all my terrain on MDF board. I beveled the edges already, pre-beveled them, so that'll just cut one step out. You can get this board like this, right? It's a big single thick mounting board. This is a 15-inch by 20-inch piece, and it was only $4.50 at Hobby Lobby. You can get 4x8 sheets of this. You can get, this seems to be enough for me, this 15 by 20-inch sheet. I got a couple of them. This is good cardstock, super thick, and you can get it in different colors, but I got it in black. And then I cut some chunks out like 1 by 1.5 to be my pallets. Okay, I'm going to stack barrels on the pallets, and you're going to have a like an orderly stack of 55-gallon drums. Now I also have cardstock. Okay, so I take cardstock, just your simple white cardstock, and I cut the straws, right? You just get the right length that you want. You cut it. Now you've got like maybe a 10mm straw, and then I stood them up on the cardstock, and then I took my Elmer's glue and I put a couple of drops inside and let that dry overnight. And what that does is it glues the straw to the paper. Now, why would I want to do that? Well, when I go through and I cut all these out, I ensure that I cut, the circle around the top, and what will happen is I'll have a straw with a piece of cardstock glued to the end of it. So it'll be basically a closed barrel, or a barrel with a lid on it. And that's exactly what I was hoping for. Now the problem with Elmer's, or I should say white glue, and straws is that it doesn't stick very well. The straw is very slick, and when you put the white glue and it dries, the straw will sometimes just slide right off. Like there is a spot right there where there's glue, and the straw has slid right off. Okay, so another alternative to that might be super glue. You drop a couple of drops of super glue in there, they should not fall off. And I'm going to take some of these straws, stand them up. Like some of these I've already pre-cut, some of them I have not finished cutting. It is very time intensive. It takes a lot of time to cut these little circles around the outside edges of this straw. Okay, and then I'm going to take some super glue. I'm going to put just a simple drop in each one of these. Now the super glue should fall all the way down to the paper, and then as it kind of grips the sides of the straw as well as the paper. Basically, if it'll gradually sink down the bottom and it'll spread out at the bottom, giving you a lid. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to set those off to the side. All right, so now you need two different types of barrels. You need some that are open-ended on both sides, and then you need some that are close-ended, the ones that go on the cardstock. All right, so now you need some open-ended barrels, because when you put the first pallet on your terrain board, right, you got a pallet, you put it on there, and then you put some barrels on there, and they can have open tops, because you're going to take a second pallet and you're going to put it right on top of those barrels, and then on top of that pallet, so it's going to be like a double-decker, you're going to put the closed barrels up on top of that. And then on your second pallet, because what I do is I'm going to have like 3 pallets. I'm going to have some barrels on this, with this on it, some barrels on that, and then over on the side I'm going to have a pallet with just barrels on it. So we take one of these pallets, and I'm going to need about 10 to 12 pieces, right? Some barrels. Now you'll notice that sometimes when you're using your scissors on the straws, it'll pinch and it'll look a lot like that. All you gotta do is just squeeze a little bit and it pops right open. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stack these barrel pieces on the pallet. Now remember, this is the one that's gonna go underneath. This is gonna be the under barrels. And because of that, you really only need to do the outside edge of the barrels. You do not need to do the center piece. Why? Well, nobody's ever going to see that. So you can hopefully you can see that. One way I kind of maneuver them around is with a paintbrush stem, right? You can put it right on the inside of the straw. This will give the illusion that this pallet is actually covered in barrels. You want to put a little lip, whoa, okay, a little static electricity there. You want to give a little lip around the outside edge so that gives the impression that they're stacked up on a pallet. So now I'm going to drop my super glue down on the inside, and it should puddle up at the very bottom of the straw against the backing board so that when it dries, they're glued together. Okay, so now on the base, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a putty, the dry deck spackling, over the entire thing. And then I'm going to take my pallet and I'm going to position the pallet in the putty so that it kind of sets into the putty just slightly. Not a whole lot, not like pushing it down in there, just setting it on top so it kind of sets in it just a little bit so that it kind of gives the impression that there's weight. Now, the only reason why I'm using any kind of putty on this board at all, I could just paint it and flock it, right? I could grit it, paint it, and flock it. Well, the reason why I'm putting putty on here is to give it an uneven look. I don't want it to be perfectly flat and smooth like a board. So now I've got that. Now I'm going to take my palette and I'm going to set it by a little bit of pressure just so that it kind of sinks down into the putty a little bit. And he's going to go. And they don't have to be exactly perfect, or you don't have to measure it out. Sometimes you want to put it at a corner to kind of to animate your palettes a little bit better. You might want to go exactly even. I personally like to animate them a little bit. I know the military would have lined them up so that they would have been perfect and dress right dress and all that, but I feel that it's better to have it animated a little bit. Okay, now my second palette has no barrels on it because those barrels that I put on that one are going to have lids. Okay, so we let the putty dry. All right, now while we wait for the dry decks to dry, I wanted to briefly go over this a little bit. Those little pieces of straw with a little paper glued on the ends. You can't just leave them all jagged like that. You got to cut them around and literally cut them round. I've considered using an X-Acto knife, but I found that scissors are faster. All right, so I'm going to take some time to cut some of these out to make the top for this and the barrels for that, and I'll be right back. All right, now as we wait for the dry decks to dry, it should turn white. So basically we're still waiting for that. It looks like it's still got a little brown, little pink here, waiting for that to turn completely white before I start painting it. But in the meantime, what we can do is we can move on to the next step. And one of the, whoa, these things are not the same length. Okay, the next step is for me to put a top over this palette, right? So you would get like a double-decker palette kind of thing. Now I've thought about putting this on at an angle or crooked just to give it a little bit more animation, but I don't think that's necessary. because I've already turned the whole palette a little bit. I mean, I guess I could do it off a little bit, but no, I think I'm going to try to get it as straight as possible. All right, now for this project, for this piece, I'm going to use E6000. This is a glue that I've been using for the last couple of years in my hobbies, and it's worked out very well for me. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bunch of this on the bottom of this backer board, right? Basically, just so that when I put it on here, I'm going to kind of squirgle it around. Squirgle it, I guess, is that a word? I'm going to squirgle it around a little bit so it's becoming very sticky on both the straws and the palette. And then I'm going to squirgle it. I'm going to let it sit right there. Now this does have an odor to it. Whoop, that's a little off center. Let's kind of center that this way. That looks good like that. Okay. So there, that's been squirgled. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same on the top of this and on this one. I'm going to put these barrels that I've got pre-cut. I still have a ton of other barrels that are going to go on my second fuel dump. Okay, now these barrels that are going to go on here are going to go on kind of haphazardly. There's no, because these are the ones that are currently being used by the soldiers in the area. So they're not going to be in perfect, I mean, you can put whatever you want. It's your fuel dump, right? But I'm going to put 3 rows of glue. I don't know if you can see. I hope you can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to put 3 rows, kind of like crop fields. Okay, so there's 3 rows there. I'm going to do the same here. These are even rows, equal distant from each other and the sides. And it's okay if you get a little extra string laying around here and there. That can all be broken off later. All right, so now I come back at it with these barrels. Now these barrels have tops on them. They actually have tops. Those tops were the cardstock that got glued to them. So now just plop these barrels down haphazardly. They don't have to be touching. They don't have to be in perfect rows. You can put them side by side. You can put them however you want to put them. So I'm kind of putting them randomly just so that I get a good distribution of like where they are, and so I don't run out. So what I mean, not if I don't run out. What's the word I'm looking for? So that I'll make sure I get everything covered. Wish I had my tweezers because they would be needed. There we go. Now you notice how there's kind of like a random locations or placement of them. If I want a few more, I guess I could cut out a few more just to fill them in. Might just do that because it looks like I'm going to get 8 more of them. All right, so once I get these cut out and put on there, I'll be right back. All right, guys, we're now that we're progressing, we got the barrels on the pallets on the everything. So now what we're going to do is we're going to grid it, and then once that dries, then we'll paint it. The grit is just a little bit of white glue and water mixed together is the plaster, basically. That's just a little bit, because this is a small model. And then water. I do about a 50-50. So 1 part glue, 1 part water, and then stir it. I'm going to put this in the box. This is these are my flock boxes. Okay, and then I'm going to paint the areas around the pallets. Okay, that was probably not enough glue. Wow. Trying to avoid putting the glue on the pallet. I want the pallet to be not covered in grit. So then I'll bring the grit over, and I just set that in there, and here we go. There we go. Now I'm going to let that dry. We got the grit. I don't know if you can see that. Let's put that up in the camera. I got the grit on the base. I got the pallets. I got the barrels. Be back in just a minute. All right, now that that glue is dry, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and I'm going to use the Krylon Black Color Master spray paint that I've been using on all my terrain, and when that dries, we'll be back. Welcome back. Now, I was able to paint everything black, let it dry overnight, and now we're going to go ahead and put the finishing touches on the fuel dump. Okay, so let's recap what we've done already. MDF board, beveled edges, plaster, pallets with backer board, straws cut down to size that were glued onto cardstock, cut around the edges to give the lids, some straws underneath without lids because they don't need it because the second pallet when it's on top covers that, then the straws on top, and then I even have one barrel down there laying down on the ground. Grit, primed black. That's where we're at. Okay, the next step would be to paint that brown. So we go with a Folk Art dark brown. That is the brown that I use, Folk Art dark brown. What I do is I mix a 50% water, maybe not even a 50, maybe a 45% water with the Folk Art dark brown because it's already kind of runny anyway. Not sure how much I'm going to need for this project. I assume that's probably enough. And when you add water to it, it becomes a little bit thinner. Folk Art is really good about holding its pigment when you thin it. If you thin it too far, the pigment will break up. It will break up, so you got to be careful not to thin it out too far. But again, we're just doing terrain, and this is the base bottom coat of the terrain, so you don't really even need to worry about it. So now, all of you have been painting for a while, most likely. If you haven't, I just want to let you know that you want to use the largest brush for the job. So if it's a big job, use a big brush. It'll hold more paint, it'll go faster, right? If it's a very, very tiny, delicate, small job, use a very tiny, delicate brush. All right, so the base is painted, right? And you can see that I've got the brown all around on all the grit. And you can kind of see how the grit is pulling up. It's because it's a raised surface and this was watered, so it should fall back down into the bottom sides of the grit. What that's kind of doing is it doesn't really matter because what I'm going to do is I'm going to dry brush over it with the light brown and I'm going to be hitting all these raised areas. So and it gives kind of a tritone effect. It gives the black, the brown, and the tan, and that looks really good for your dirt base coat. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry, and we'll be back with the Teddy Bear Tan dry brush. All right, now that my dark brown has dried, and you can kind of see how dark it actually is when painted on top of black. It basically just gives the black kind of a brown undertone. Stiff bristle brush, and then like your traditional dry brush, you would get the paintbrush wet. You would take the excess off on maybe a paper towel or piece of cardboard or something like that, and then you would dry brush, right? Well, that's unnecessary. It's a piece of terrain. Most of it's going to be covered by flock anyway. I can just take a very little piece of paint here, take most of it off on the palette, and then I can drag it across there. And remember, when doing dry brushing, you want to do it in layers. So you want to increase the layers. And I don't know if you can kind of see that. I'm going to check my camera. Where you got like a dry brush on there. All right, when I get this dry brush, I'll be right back. All right, and so you get the look, right? And I can leave it just like that, you know, if I wanted to. I mean, if it was in the desert or something like that, that would be perfectly great. But I'm gonna put some static, not some static grass, but I am gonna put some dark yellow grass on there. It's going to be a different effect than what you've seen in some of my previous videos, but it's still going to look really cool. I'm going to go ahead and paint the barrels and the pallets OD green because I want this to be an American fuel dump, and they would have painted their fuel drums OD. When I get that done, I'll be right back. All right, so the next step is to continue working on the drums. I've got them painted OD. It's still drying. It's going to take another 5 minutes or so, but I'm going to go over and dry brush the oil drums with a steel. It's going to basically kind of expose the corners and the wear and tear that would have been through natural use in the field. So in about 5 minutes, we'll go ahead and do the natural steel. All right, welcome back. The OD green has dried. So now what we're going to do is we're going to dry brush that steel color I was talking about, the natural steel. I don't have a spot for that in my palette yet, so we'll make a new one. The natural steel, because it's a dry brush, I'm not going to add, sometimes I would add water, sometimes I don't. It just depends. If I add water, I usually will wipe off any excess on a paper towel. What I'm going to do with this is not a whole lot, okay? Just very subtle. I am going to wipe it off because I remember I add the water. Very subtle, the edges of the pallets, because I consider the pallets to be a metal. I think they are metal, actually. They're kind of like skids. And along the upper corners of the barrels, because they would have rubbed. And any mistakes is okay, because that was basically, like if I drag it across something that I shouldn't, what it's going to do, it's going to make it look like the paint in that area was rubbed off, which is fine, because that's kind of what this whole process is about. A little bit, just a little drag of silver on all the barrels. This will give the illusion that it's a metal barrel that's been painted green. All right, so you get the impression that they're metal barrels on pallets, worn a little bit. Okay, so now one of the last steps is to put the grass flock on there. I'm using a mixture that I haven't used in a while. I just thought I'd pull it out, give it a shot. It's earth. Okay, and this is a Woodland Scenics flock, and it's not static grass. I don't know if the lighting showed that off very good, but it's kind of it's a green, but it's kind of a yellowish green. Okay, so we're going to use that. And as you know, we put a little bit of glue. And I won't need a whole lot because this model is so small. And then I use about 50% water. So it's a seriously watered down white glue. Now I'm going to put a lot of glue for this flock, right? And I want it to look, because I want the majority of this base to actually have flock. But any flock that doesn't shine through or doesn't cover properly will allow the brown and the tan grit to shine through. This almost blends with the tan and the grit. All right, see, there's the flock, and you can kind of see how it kind of matches. All right, once I get this flocked, I'll be right back. Oh, before I leave, again, I'm not going to do 100%. I'm only, like some of the areas where there's rocks and things like that, I'm going to let that be exposed because I'd like to show off my other handiwork. But otherwise, the majority of this is going to be covered. All right, when I get it done, I'll be right back. All right, now just as a highlight and to make it kind of stand out a little bit more, I'm going to put 2 or 3 spots of a lighter green flock. So it'll kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of accentuate it, highlight it, make it stand out a little bit more. But it is going to be smaller areas. All right, so now what do we see here? We see some of the grit. We see some of the yellow flock. We also see the light green static grass flock, kind of giving it. I like to have multiple dimensions, like the paint, right? We got black, dark brown, light brown, but then on the flock we got the grit shining through, the yellow, the green. So you get kind of a three-dimensional look. Also with the paint, what do we got? We got black on the bottom, on the base, OD green, dry brushed, kind of a silver steel, giving you a metallic look to these barrels. Okay, so this right here is a completed model. This is your terrain piece. This if I need to make like 100 of these, it wouldn't be too hard to do. I'm definitely not going to make 100 of these, but I do need to make about 5 or 6 more of these for my game. But it's not going to be. How much did this cost me? Probably $1. You know, with the board, the MDF board, the sand, the flock, the straws. I would say probably less than $1. All right, so now that you've seen the seen what this looks like, I'll see you in the next video.